So it comes full circle back to the fact that it's the community and the pupils that will suffer if you don't look at risk, or if you don't have those strategic plans, and if you don't keep maintaining that assurance for yourself.
Hello, welcome back to the Creating Value in Schools podcast with me, Liz Worthen, where we talk about working sustainably in schools. And today I'm teaming up once again with the Unbound SBLs, Helen, Burge and Emma Gray, for a school business leadership catch-up. And it's lovely to be back with you both. And today our focus is risk. Now, let's be honest, I feel like risk management might not be everyone's idea of a fascinating listen. So let's start with, why does risk or risk management matter? Why should people carry on listening?
Well, I think risk management is important because it helps us strategically navigate an organisation, from school development plan to the outcomes that it wants to achieve on that school development plan. So it's embedded in every decision we make, and it can create discussion around a topic where some people might have some uncertainty, and the discussions around that topic and maybe the mitigations that come out of that can be the strategic way forward. So I just see it as it's embedded in everything we're doing. I think one of the dangers of it is that we think it's a risk assessment, and we think there's some paperwork involved, and we think that it's only a paper exercise. And actually, if you fall into that trap, you are missing out on the opportunity to navigate the organisation in a structured and considered way.
So tell me, what are some of the risks that schools need to be thinking about? Or, what's the danger if schools aren't having that risk register or aren't putting those things in place? What's the kind of thing that can happen?
I think it's worth turning it around the other way and looking at it from a really positive point of view, because risk is something that everybody understands and everybody can feed into. So it's really important, and a crucial part of governance is that they're looking at the risks and assessing them, and providing that oversight for the executive teams. And that's risk is something that they can really get their teeth into and really add value. Because governors often go in and say, well, I'm not an educationalist. I don't know about education. I don't know about safeguarding. I don't know about data management. I run a business, I run a bakery, or I'm a parent governor, that sort of thing. But actually, when you say, right, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is our sort of vision, what are the risks of us not achieving that vision? And that's where they can get involved in, because that's more of a sort of overriding, what are the risks of this not happening, and how do we then make sure that we keep those risks to a minimum? What are the risks this year? What might be the risks next year? It's a constantly changing picture. So when you talk about schools that only look at their risk register once a year, actually the risks, it's much more dynamic than that. It moves much more quickly. Something happens, there might be a white paper, or there might be a change in the demographic, or there might suddenly be an announcement that a new building development's going up, or it might be, as in one school that I went into, a huge housing estate was coming down to make way for a new building development, which meant the families were being moved out of the area in order to then move back that's years out of school. So there's all sorts of things that can suddenly impact a school. And that's where the risk management comes into it, and keeping that sort of weather eye on the community. And the governors represent the community, almost keep the eye on the school in the community. So they bring that local knowledge and local understanding, as well as support for the team, operationally running the school. Sorry, I've moved away completely from your question, but it's a very looking at risk through a very positive lens as to how it can add value at every level, I think is a really important place for a school to start.
I think also it's understanding the types of risks. So you talked there, Emma, about a threat to the very existence of the school, with potential that all its pupils were going to be moved somewhere else for a period of time. You know, that's a large threat to the school's actual existence. But there will be core business risks. So you talked about maybe a change in policy and how that's going to impact. That's a different type of risk to the big threat of all your pupils haven't been relocated. But then there will also be operational risks that I would expect governors and trustees to not be involved with. They've left the managers of the school, the leadership team, to manage with those operational risks. And it's at that point when the senior leadership team have to escalate it if this operational risk then becomes a core business risk or becomes a threat to the existence of the organisation. So risks can change, can't they? And I think that you talked about governing body adding that local insight into the school and the community that it's within. That's an example of how risks can be escalated down to SLT as well, isn't it? And how they're going to manage those local risks.
This is bringing back memories for me of, there was a point in my role where I ended up with that responsibility for updating the risk register on a monthly basis and which are the issues that need to be escalated. But my predominant memory of that is moving lozenges around on a PowerPoint slide, because we had to show which risks had gone up and what had got down and where were they at now on that map, that RAG rated map of likely what's, the impact of the risk. So yeah, it was a slightly stressful experience.
I can understand that, Liz, but I'd hope that there would be lots of people adding inputting into you, so they would be reporting to you about the little nuances that might impact on the likelihood of an event happening, and that you were then able, as well as like updating the PowerPoint, that you could then shift the governors or whoever was looking at it would then have a strategic conversation in reaction to it and either agree to not do anything or agree a set of steps to mitigate that risk. Because that's the key bit. You can make the lozenges all look very pretty, but if no one understands the context behind it and no one is then responding to that context, yeah, you've just made lozenges look pretty on a page, which is a bit sad, which I think is what happens quite often with risk registers. It's almost a point. Quite often it gets to the end of an agenda. I know I'm talking negatively again about it, Emma. Quite often it comes to the end of an agenda. People are tired. They're ready to, move on. It's almost like, don't ask any questions now because this meeting's going to finish. But actually, that risk register should have been at the start. Our top 3 risks are still the same top 3 risks, or actually there's been a change and governors need to know this has happened. And also I would expect for the senior leadership team reports, for the business manager's report, for head teacher's report to be reflecting those risks. We told you that this risk was happening, and just to let you know, there's a likelihood that this is going to increase and we're mitigating it by this. It's my personal opinion that if reports are shared with governors and trustees that are talking about things that aren't on the risk register, that's just background noise. And actually, they should be focused on what's on the risk register and alerting governors and trustees to changes with those risks. I'll get off my high horse.
I often think that a bit like this podcast, things are perfectly set up in 3s, like the Unbound SBLs. So in a risk register, you've got the strategic risks, the operational risks, and the educational risks. And you could almost put three key risks in each section, and everybody can remember those risks. And as Helen says, anything else you're talking about, unless it's a real mover into the space, it is something that you're looking at. That's what you're really focusing on this year. That's where you're getting the topics for assurance, and where you are talking about where to spend the money on reducing the risks or improving the outcomes. So I think having it in constantly thinking about those 3 areas, strategic, operational, and educational, really supports the schools to move forward and enjoy the process of the risk register and their risk management systems.
And I was going to say, could you give us a few examples of things that might fit into those 3 different categories?
So an example of a strategic could be around falling numbers on roll. Over time, that's going to have an impact on your income, that's going to have an impact on your staffing structure. And if you can see it happening in 3 years' time, you need to do something about it now, and or have a plan in place for how you're going to deal with it, and then keep monitoring it when other things happen over time. So say you knew you're going to have a fall in roll and you had to compress classes down, and therefore staffing structure needs changing. There's a time involved in doing that staffing consultation. And it might be that you've planned it all and then someone resigns anyway and moves on to another post and you don't need to go through it. But you need to be aware of what you need to go through to manage that risk and to mitigate another likely risk, which is the damage that can happen to your culture because of a staff restructure or a change in the classroom format. One risk, if you're not dealing with it properly, could actually create a whole other set of issues for you to deal with.
Absolutely, yeah. And then we come on to reputational issues. Interesting, yeah, Justin, I think the last couple of days, some of the news alerts coming up on my phone have been like, oh, MP is very worried about supposed plans for a school's restructure or a trust restructuring. Or it might be that those parents, if you're looking at changing the class structure, that might then get parents very worried and they'll be talking on social media about it.
Reputational damage is always the sort of last block, as it were, in that it's sort of atop everything that we say. What would the Daily Mail say? I think the thing about identifying your key risks, and we talked about the possibility of them being sort of 6 to 9 key risks within. I mean, you don't have to have 6 to 9, but having those key risks then leads very nicely onto your KPIs, because using Helen's example, if you can see that 3 or 4 years down the line, there is predicted fall in pupil numbers, then start looking at those KPIs like what's your staff turnover like? So are you going to be able to anticipate staff turnover that you need to happen in 4 years' time? And how are you monitoring what your staff turnover looks like, and some of those ICFP metrics, monitoring them as you go through to really give you an understanding, and monitoring pupil numbers and how pupils move within the year can really support how you're looking at the key risks and how you're monitoring them, and what assurance you need to put in to enable you to keep moving it all forward.
And to link that back to the reputational risk is, so if you know that your pupil numbers are going to fall in 3 years' time or decline significantly over 3 years, so there's that bit of marketing that you can do to try and attract more pupils, but also that's their work around, okay, actually, as a leadership team, we know we need to learn about stakeholder management. We need to have a really solid comms piece in place. So you can start putting those mitigations in place around safeguarding your reputation in 3 years' time as well. And that might involve putting some additional cost into the budget to get some comms support specifically about managing the school's reputation. It's basically a change management process, isn't it? And some stakeholders feel that they haven't been listened to, haven't been brought into the conversation early enough. And if you can try and mitigate that early on, people are still going to be upset, definitely, but you might have less people upset, and they might not feel inclined to talk about it on social media because actually they do know that they have been communicated to, and they've had the opportunity to raise it directly with senior leaders, because sometimes people voice it on social media because they haven't had the chance to raise it directly. So yeah, it's to look at all types of risk when you're considering one issue, isn't it?
That's a really good point, isn't it? Yeah, one issue might actually feed into several different types of risks. Interesting. And it sounds like what you're saying is that actually that risk planning, risk awareness, can inform your planning. And actually it's
Definitely.
something to be then proactive about rather than always kind of covering or something that's reactive after something's happened.
Yeah, and I think I would remove that word can and put should in, that it should be informing your planning. It's the very first thing you think about. What are we doing here? And then what are the risks of us not achieving our aims? And then taking it from there. So it's almost like, I suppose the first step is deciding what your vision is, but the second step is definitely should be risk, and then that everything else feeds down from that. So, I mean, that's why Helen and I are so keen on it. We go into schools and see how risk is just a compliance tool, or they're just looking at it once a year, or it's 40 pages of things that are not never going to happen, but things that are unlikely to happen because they've got decent controls in place. They're not focused on the real things that can and probably will go wrong in the next few years. So that's why we started talking about risky business and started talking about how we could get the message out in a fun way. We're not trying to be directive in how exactly how it should be done, because there are lots of different ways of doing it, but we're suggesting make it very user friendly, make it interesting, make it engaging for all levels of leadership, governance and leadership, and make it something that everybody can really talk about and add value with.
For details of upcoming risky business events, including dates and locations, check out the links in the show notes. And if you enjoy following the podcast, why not sign up to our newsletter? Get insights and resources straight to your inbox. Now back to the show.
Yeah. And I think also, especially for trust, it's link it to your internal scrutiny. So we've got this risk. So let's go back to the financial controls risk, and let's imagine that we've got a new finance system, or that a school is being onboarded to a trust and they've got to learn that new finance system. So what mitigations have been put there, and how do we know that those mitigations are working when we're on board in that school and onto that new finance system? And what assurances do governors get? Do they need assurance about that financial control? Possibly if a previous school had all gone wrong for some reason, so they might have a tighter oversight on it. But you've got the 3 lines of defence, and actually the first line is that operational financial management. So maybe the CFO is ensuring that the training is being adhered to and is doing spot checks on purchase orders being in place and invoices being paid on time and all the rest of it. And then you will have the second line of defence, and that is some KPIs that are reported to governors. You would see it in terms of your creditors and your debtors. Are we still happy that we are paying our invoices on time, or that we are ensuring that the income is coming in on time in a timely manner? So that's a very simple example of a report that could be shared with governors and trustees as a second line of defence. And then your third line of defence is actually having an independent auditor come in and look at your financial controls. So that might be internal audit or external audit. But just having someone independent that is then sharing with governors and trustees, yeah, your financial controls are okay, or these are the areas of development. So think about those 3 lines of defence, I think is really important. And the internal scrutiny and the risk register altogether. So here's our risk, financial controls, and when a new school onboards, or when a new school adapts to a new finance system, okay, what are we going to think about in terms of internal scrutiny? And what specific lines of defence do we want to see in our reporting structure? I've made it sound like it's incredibly technical and that there's this formulaic approach, but actually I think most schools will go, oh yes, we do that. We just haven't documented that we do it. Or
we don't
haven't
call it risk. We talk in the risky business session that Helen and I run. We talk about lines of defence as levels of assurance, but lines of defence is perhaps a little bit more user friendly, and that absolutely applies to LA schools. I think quite a lot of governors assume that the LA is managing the finances and everything. They've got that assurance from the LA, but have they ever tested it? Now, I'm not casting any aspersions on LA finance teams, because I think they all do an amazing job. But there is a acceptance, I guess, from governing bodies that everything's fine, the LA are on it, and then that I've seen examples of it being a surprise when actually, due to the sheer number of schools that they're dealing with, they're not on it for your school. So how do you just reassure yourself as a governor that the LA are reducing the risks, the financial risks in your school? How are they supporting? So I think it's just as important having that process, risk management process, risk register, ability to commission assurance when needed, having something in the budget, which just means that they can pull somebody in the year if they need to, just to get that, making sure that everything's good.
Yeah, I think that local authority schools obviously have the school's financial value standard, which should be completed by March 31st every year by the governors. That's the governors almost providing their own second line of defence by looking at the procedures, looking at the processes, and almost I've seen it where school business leaders have completed the SBS and then governors have reviewed it and then challenged it. But I've also seen examples of when the SBS outcomes, actions that are going to happen every year are exactly the same for 3 years on the trot. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. That suggests that no action has actually been taken since, 2 years ago when it was put on the SVS, but also suggests that governors aren't treating it as the second line of defence tool that they should be treating it as. And then really, unfortunately, it's almost then the double whammy of failure is that then the local authority also aren't reviewing it and spotting that there's been 3 years of the same actions on the SVS, and they haven't then been going back and challenging the school leadership and the governors about this tool to help them assess their financial controls and the risks around finance. So I think that local authority schools use the SVS and use it as a reflective tool that it is to help them understand their risk and to help them understand where they can develop a better response to some of the controls that they might have put in place already.
And that does take us really almost in full circle to what we started to talk about, because it's important that governors understand that buck doesn't stop with the LA, because what actually happens in real life is that a school might go into deficit, and the governors will think, oh, well, that's fine. That's the LA's issue. But actually, it's the community's issue, because eventually it will impact the pupils in the school in the way of resources or staffing or those extra bits that we all want to have in schools. And it's the pupils in the community that will be the ones that suffer, and that's what the governors are there for, to keep that eye on the community as a whole and the school in its community. So it comes full circle back to the fact that it's the community and the pupils that will suffer if you don't look at risk, or if you don't have those strategic plans, and if you don't keep maintaining that assurance for yourself. Because that sounds now very doom, gloom, dramatic, but you know what I mean? Eventually, it's the pupils that suffer, and whoever's at blame, whoever's at fault, whoever's not done what they should be doing, and I caveat that with everybody's working really, really hard. Eventually, if something fails, it's the people that will suffer.
It takes us back, Emma, to what you were saying at the outset, that actually if you start from your mission and your purpose, our purpose as a school is to provide an amazing educational opportunity for the children, young people and families in our area, and to support this community to grow and develop. If that's always at the forefront of your mind, then you're not going to be saying, oh yeah, it doesn't matter if we haven't got the money next year. I'm sure the LA will bail us out or something. And I think one of the things that's coming across to me clearly as well is this isn't just one person's role, is it? It's not a case of you can say, oh yes, Helen as Chief Finance Officer is also the person in charge of risk, and it's all down to her. This is about layers throughout the organization.
It is about layers, absolutely, but it does need leadership. One of the things we advocate on the risk register is that a risk is owned by one person, not by the board or this SLT. It's one person has ownership of that risk, so that they can report back, monitor what's happening, and keep those actions moving forward. Because only if it's well led, is it going to happen? And don't get us wrong, there is loads of good practice out there, but Helen and I do see a lot of very generic stuff that is not adding value to the organisation or serving the community that sits around it.
And on that note, Emma, I would also add that one of the questions when I'm completing internal, my initial meetings with schools and trusts about internal scrutiny and an audit that I'm doing is, and what risk are we trying to seek assurance on? And the number of times people go and really have to, I don't know. And I think that's a real missed opportunity, because governors and trustees could get some assurance from this internal scrutiny report, or am I just writing this report because it's one of 3 that the trust has to have in a year? What value is the trust going to have from it? Have they had this? And I also ask, have you had any internal scrutiny in this area before? Can I see reports that have met? And quite often, literally for the last 3 years, they completely have the same internal scrutiny in the same area. Sometimes they have addressed risk. And then there's the worst one is when someone wants the internal scrutiny of a report because they know that their area is good and that there won't be any actions as a result. So it will look good to governors and trustees. And it's like, oh, wow, I get that you want to celebrate something, but you can provide that celebration yourself by doing your own report on the work that's happened. And, you're paying someone to do this piece of work. Get them to look at an area that maybe you're not an expert in and that someone else can add some value to. So I feel like I'm a bit negative today. Sorry.
Let's come back to, because I think you've mentioned a couple of times, the risky business events. So for school business leaders or others, anyone out there who wants to get a bit more comfortable with risk and a positive, proactive way to use risk as a planning tool, tell us about the risky business events.
Absolutely. We started Risky Business to sort of bring back that face-to-face, bespoke almost event for school business leaders that we used to have in abundance before COVID. And COVID seemed to sort of change the universe as it did. And so Helen and I started from the desire to bring that back. And we created a 3-hour session called Risky Business on managing risks. And it's applicable to governors, leadership, whether you're in a maintained school or a trust setting, school business leaders, whoever's bringing that risk leadership into the school, this is applicable for. And we've sort of tried to make it fun and interesting, and including networking with other people in the room who are also interested in leading risk. It's very much getting that sort of raising awareness of risk management in schools is what Helen and I are very excited about. The thing we're also really excited about, if I may add one more thing, is the SBL retreat in June, 18th and 19th of June. So it's a bit of an extension of Risky Business. And I think we've talked about it before on this podcast. We are really excited by the interest in the SBL retreat because there isn't really anything else like it. And we're really keen to start a sort of annual cycle of somewhere to go where you can just take a breath and think about what you're doing and reflect on how much you love your job and how you can develop it for next year. I think it'll be a really, really good development tool for school business leaders. So that's 18th, 19th of June. And again, we'll let you have the link.
Thank you. Okay, and because we love learning and reflection and development. So it's half term as we speak at the moment. So have you been catching up on any reading in half term, or maybe the last few weeks? What have you been reading or listening to?
This is going to sound a bit odd, but I've been reading quite a lot of DSBM student submissions for their operational leadership and finance modules.
Those of us who don't, this is a diploma of school business management?
School business management. Yeah, so I'm a best practice network tutor. And I thought that there was going to be some submissions this half term because obviously people are thinking, not at work, I'll try and crack through some submissions. And I think I had about 15 or 16 this morning. So, yep, definitely reading those. And they are inspirational. I love hearing about the school context, the challenges, the barriers that they're overcoming. And I just love reading them and knowing that there's this cohort of SBMs that I've not met yet who are doing amazing things in their school setting. And that is lovely to know that there's people that are very passionate at the start of their careers about schools and their particular school.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Emma, how about you?
I'm going to fail dismally at this. I'm not reading anything at the moment. I discovered the morning show on TV. I don't know whether you've seen the morning
yeah.
show. I'm a bit
I
late.
have.
I am
It's
a bit
on
late to the party, I
Apple
would
TV.
say. Yeah, it is on Apple TV. But it's really, I find it really interesting, that sort of looking back lens on the Me Too movement. And so we just sort of reached the coming of COVID in season 2. So yeah, it's not really a highbrow reading or learning, but it's really interesting and the problem with my brain is that it applies everything to school business leadership. And looking back on that whole COVID time that we went through in schools and trusts, my mind just boggles now, the things that we did in order to be able to cope with what was happening in the world. And it just reminds me how resilient we all are, actually, and how school business leaders all over the country are really ready to step up and solve problems and find solutions. And, some of the things we did, I'm just shocked by it now, looking back. But yeah.
No, it was incredible, wasn't it? I mean, I think school business leaders were sort of setting up testing centres in school over the Christmas holidays.
Yeah, been there, done
And
that.
responding to policy development that probably hadn't been written the week before, things like that. And I almost wonder whether that whole experience of us all having to dynamically respond to risk has drained us. And therefore, we're not that keen about talking about risk registers. It's almost like, yeah, do you know what? We can cope. We know that we can cope. We've demonstrated we can cope. Look what we did during COVID. And actually, no, that was actually operational risk, really. And we now need to reframe how we think about risk in that strategic and that organisational viewpoint, really.
Well, thank you very much, both. It's been great to dive into some of these things. And yes, show us why this risk is really something we want to be embracing in a positive and not leaving it as a monthly checklist. We do this because it's on the agenda, but we're not really that interested.
Even doing it monthly, Liz, would be amazing. But thanks, Liz, for inviting us. Really appreciate it. I could literally talk about risk for hours. So to condense it down into a short amount of time was quite amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.